I look at schools and I believe the schooling system is failing our kids. They failed us growing up because the foods that they gave us were garbage.
Let's go. You are incredible. Your body has a purpose. Your life has a purpose. You were designed to live the best life possible.
What's going on, my beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode. This is Listen, You're Not Defeated, and I'm your host, David Hernandez. I just wanted to remind you, if you haven't already subscribed, click the subscribe button. Every week, I bring new episodes, insight, bringing you teachings and topics to impact your life, to teach you to live not defeated, because I want to remind you, you are not defeated. So let's jump in today's episode. Today, we're talking about part 2 on how your relationship with food is shaping your life. And in today's part 2 segment, we're going to look at how our relationship with food has been cultivated, has been developed, has been created from our young life, or basically in our childhood. Okay. So today we're going to look at 5 different learning methods that as humans, especially as children, we utilize, and it's what develops who we are. It's what shapes us. And in the last part, we talked about how our food is literally shaping our life, because our food impacts our mood, it impacts our energy, it impacts our physicality, it impacts our cognitive, our thinking ability, our memory ability. It literally also impacts our shape and who we are and how we are, and ultimately also impacting our clothes, right? It impacts how we are as people. So today specifically, I want to deep dive into how our relationship with food is impacted and it is shaped from our childhood. Because let's face it, as children, we are influenced, we are shaped by literally our environment. And so the number one way, and this insight that I'm going to share with you all in terms of the 5 different learning methods that exist out there, it's not, I can't take ownership of it, but I can bring it to you as a teaching topic, basically on some of the research that I've done that I find very interesting. And I totally agree with this because it's been done by other experts in the field. And so the first method that we utilize as children is observational learning. So let's look at, how does this play in with food? If food impacts everything about us, and if in our childhood is how we start to develop our relationship with food, how does observational learning impact that? Well, observational learning is pretty self-explanatory. It is literally learning by watching, right? By seeing others do something. So picture this: you're a child, you're being raised, you're growing up, and there's 2 areas that we spend the most time in as we are growing up: home and school. These 2 areas are what start to shape us as humans. And in that, we start to look at, well, how is food in our home? What is food like in our home? So growing up, we are seeing how our mother or our father or our parents, our grandparents, our siblings start to have a relationship with food. What is their relationship like with food? What are the types of foods that they eat? What are the types of foods that are readily available at home, right? What types of snacks are there available? What types of treats or snacks are given to us? What is my environment like at home when it comes to food? So observational learning from a young age is vital, because we start to look at, well, what does mom do or what does dad do when they're angry or when they're associating with an emotional response in their life, or when they're dealing with emotions? What do they do with food? When they come home from work, what types of foods do they have? When they are wanting a snack, what type of snacks do they go to? Right? And so these are the ways that we start to be impacted in our own relationship with food. So the way we see things in our home is how we start to adopt our own relationship, and we start to look at them as normal things. So let's look at the school, for example. in pre-K, right? The treats that they give us, the snacks that they give us, or even growing up as we start to go into elementary school and middle school, what types of foods are given to us for breakfast? Do we even eat breakfast? Is breakfast even something that is presented or given to me at home? What then starts to become my relationship with breakfast? What type of foods are given to me as breakfast is how I then start to associate the foods that I should eat for breakfast. What types of foods are given to me for lunch? In that is how I start to develop a relationship with the foods I should be eating for lunch. Same go for snacks and same go for dinner when I get home from school, right? And I have dinner at home. These are the ways that we start to adopt our relationship with food. So when we look at what mom makes for breakfast or what mom makes for lunch when we're home for the summer or when we're younger and not going to school, what mom makes for dinner or dad or grandma makes, this is how we start to develop our relationship with these types of foods. If vegetables are something that are not given to me at a young age growing up, well, my relationship with vegetables is either going to be non-existent or it's going to be a negative relationship. It's not going to be a well-received relationship or a healthy relationship or a even joyous relationship. And same goes for all the other foods, right? If frozen foods or processed foods are what regularly are available or given to me from my childhood, then what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to adopt a relationship with processed foods and frozen foods, and I'm going to associate them as my way of being nurtured and or the way I receive my nutrients, the way I start to become satisfied with foods. And if that relationship is developed, and that is what my environment is around my life growing up, then that is the exact relationship I'm going to start to develop as I grow older. So don't be surprised if today you were raised in that type of environment. Today, you might be really attracted to those types of foods, to frozen foods, to processed foods, right? Or maybe you were developed in a home, raised in a home that did introduce you to vegetables, did introduce you to a healthy, balanced food. That is how we start to develop our relationship with food. So one learning method is observational. Now let's go to another one, conditional learning. And this is where reward and punishment is introduced. You're rewarded for doing something good and you're punished for doing something bad. And this ties in really, really deep when we're talking about food, because many times when we're growing up, those around us, parents or adults, utilize food as a reward and as a punishment. And now parents, hear me out. This is very detrimental if we adopt this method to teach our kids how to behave or how to reward them or how to punish them, because they then start to adopt a relationship with food in regards to reward and regards to punishment. Food should never be utilized as a reward or punishment method, because that is how we start to adopt an unhealthy relationship with food. So let me share an example with you. Let's say you come home from school, and I've used this example before in the past, but let's just say you come home from school, you have a bad day. You got in a fight with your best friend. Now mom sees that you're upset, and to make you feel good, she sits down next to you and she brings you a cookie. It's supposed to be intended to cheer you up, right? To make you feel better. That cookie to you now starts to become an association for me to feel good. I start to now adopt this relationship with a cookie as something that is going to make me feel good. It's going to make me feel better. It's going to help me get over my anger, or help me get over my sadness, or help me deal with this sadness and anger. As kids, we look at it as, okay, well, we're just giving my son or my daughter a little treat so that she can feel better. But when that pattern starts to be repeated, we start to adopt this relationship with a cookie or a treat in this way. And we start to create neural connections in our brain that start to associate anger, sadness. Okay, go to a cookie. You need a treat to feel better. And this is how we start to adopt an unhealthy relationship with the cookie, with the treat. And a cookie was never intended to make you feel good or make you feel bad. It was never intended to be used to heal your wounds or to manage your emotions. And this is how, as this pattern starts to be repeated, we start to develop this association with emotional eating. We go to food to deal with our emotions, but if we look at it, it was developed at a young age. It was given to us. It was conditionally learned. And the same way in terms of punishing. If they did something bad, we sometimes as parents might tell them, well, you're not going to have dessert then. You're not going to have pizza tonight because you didn't do your homework. You didn't do this chore in the house. You're not going to have your snack today. Now there's a punishment associated with it in a negative way. So therefore, it starts to even develop a bit of rebellion in us. And it starts to develop, we start to develop an unhealthy relationship because now we're being punished for something and we're being taken away food from us in a bad way as a punishment. And this goes for some parents that I've heard them say, you're not going to eat dinner tonight because you didn't finish your homework. Or you can't have this, you can't eat dinner until you finish your homework. That is also an unhealthy relationship that starts to be adopted, because many times there are people that when they are in a stressful situation, that is how they start to also develop the non-eating relationship associated with even sometimes emotional eating. When they're dealing with emotions, they emotionally not eat. Because maybe when they were being raised and growing up, they were punished because they didn't do things. And they were punished they're punished by not eating. They can't eat if they don't finish or do certain things. And growing up in schools, what do? If the school passes, right, or your class passes, or you win, what do? They throw a pizza party. They throw a cake party. Everything rewarding is around food. So now in order to feel good or to feel like you're doing great, we end up going to food to make us feel good or to make us feel rewarded or to make us feel like we're doing a good job. All of these things start to develop an unhealthy relationship with food. They start to develop a relationship with food that starts to become detrimental in the long run. So this would be considered conditional learning. And we want to avoid utilizing food as a reward or as a punishment. There are many different things out there that we can utilize as a reward system. Or in this case, if you even want to look at as a punishment system, right? And so as parents, I just highly, highly recommend, let's not use food as a reward or punishment, because that starts to adopt a specific relationship with your kids growing up that we don't want them to fall into, okay? So this is how growing up, we start to develop relationship with food in this way. So that's the second learning method, right? Conditional learning. Now let's look at the third one, play learning, which is also a self-exploration, right? Playing is how we start to develop this learning ability. We start to learn by playing as kids growing up. So that's why, how does this impact even with food, right? There's games that we can play of being mother and father or being adults, right? And we start to play with certain things. Growing up in that, we can start to teach kids how to develop a better relationship with food, even playing games that encourage kids to have healthy relationships with food, playing games with kids that teach them what proper nutrition is, what a balanced nutrition is, based on how you feel nutrition is, right? It's important to be able to educate our kids. So maybe in your home, you don't eat meat and you are plant-based, or you're vegetarian, or you're vegan, depending on what your nutrition desire is. We can start educating our kids on that. Or maybe if today you find that you don't have a healthy relationship with food, then we need to look at, how can I get educated so that then I can start to educate even my kids? But growing up, playing is another way how we learn. And in that, we also start to develop this relationship with food. I remember growing up, when we would play games at school, many times there was games associated with food. Whoever won this game, you'd get a treat. You'd get a Jolly Rancher. You'd get a chocolate. You'd get some type of prize when I'm playing this game. Even I remember after a baseball game, when we would win or when we would not win, we would still get food. And I remember they would give us the oatmeal cream pies and a juice or a high C or some type of sugary drink, right? And so even in playing in that way is how I start to develop a relationship with food. So we want to look at this. These are ways on how today you can start reflecting and start looking at, what is my relationship with food today? And what was my childhood like? What was around me? How was food presented to me? What was my environment like at home and at school in regards to food? I look at schools and I believe the schooling system is failing our kids. They failed us growing up because the foods that they gave us were garbage most times. Processed foods, frozen foods, high sugary foods, high fatty foods. They were not nutrient-dense foods. So growing up, I remember I was going to school and all they gave us was fried chicken, pizza, cereal for breakfast, sugar, right? Sugary drinks, fruit punch. They gave us a lot of processed and high fat and high sugar foods. So these things start to shape our relationship today with food. That is why I encourage you today to look at, as I'm sharing this insight with you, look at, what was my childhood like? What was your childhood like? What was your childhood like growing up? How was food presented to you? What was given to you? How was food given to you? What types of foods were given to you? Because also when we look at our culture, also impacts our relationship with food. Growing up, if you're raised, for me, for example, I was raised in a Mexican home. So what do you think was around me all the time? Well, Mexican food. And I can't say Mexican food is one of the healthiest foods out there. So therefore, growing up, I started to have a relationship with food in a not so healthy way, because there was tortillas given to us all the time, right? There were beans given to us all the time, which were probably cooked in some really high fat or lard. We'd go on to breakfast. We'd have Mexican food, right? We'd go to Mexican restaurants and they would give us a lot of this food. That's just what I was raised on. But there came a time where I had to recognize and realize, okay, if I continue to eat these foods that are part of my culture, that I was raised on, that were a part of my environment growing up, grandma cooked them, mom cooked them, aunts cooked them. If I continue to eat this type of food, well, I'm going to probably end up like many people around me. And I promise you, many of them aren't necessarily the healthiest. When we look at the Mexican culture as a whole, and I'm not saying this to knock on it because I am Mexican, but the sad truth is that many people from this culture don't have a good relationship with food or a healthy relationship with food. And many of them are obese or dealing with a lot of health complications. Your culture growing up starts to shape your relationship with food. Maybe you're not Mexican, but maybe you were American culture, right? Or other ethnic cultures, whatever your ethnicity is. From Colombia, from Puerto Rico, from down south, right? All you Southerners out there. You know what I'm talking about. Your culture impacts your relationship with food, especially from a young age, because that's all you start to see. If on Sundays, it's pastas or fried chicken or chile rellenos for us or burritos, tacos, whatever it is, that is what we start to adopt as our relationship with food. And I quickly recognized that. And I realized if I do not change my relationship with food, I will probably more than likely end up like many within this culture. Like even many from my family that sadly, I have to say, aren't necessarily the healthiest. And high blood pressure might be around in your family, maybe diabetes, maybe high cholesterol, and all of that is because of their relationship with food. And so today, if you're recognizing that your relationship with food isn't necessarily the best, it's not the greatest, we can reflect and look at, well, what was my childhood like? How was I introduced to food? How was I raised on food? Will give us insight as to who you are today and what you're doing today. And if we can start to correlate and start to look at, yeah, my influence growing up wasn't necessarily the healthiest. Therefore, growing up, I adopted this unhealthy relationship with food. Then what can we do today? What are you willing to do today to educate yourself to better your relationship with food? As I get the privilege of coaching many men and women and mentoring many of them to teach them how to develop a better relationship with food and how they're now recognizing, oh my goodness, I didn't realize this was an issue. I didn't realize how much it was impacting my life. And as they start to better their relationship with food, they start to get tremendous results. They start to release weight that was stubborn on them that they were never able to release. They start to have more energy. They start to think better. They start to have more ideas. They start to have more stamina. They start to be able to build muscle. They start to be able to now introduce a better relationship to their kids, to their environment, to their family. Allison, one of my students who will be on with us in the next coming episodes, she has made a tremendous impact with the information that she's learned. One, she didn't know how her relationship with food was impacting her, how it was shaping her. Once she learned that, she was able to implement it with her. She realized she came to me because she accepted and she was struggling with emotional eating. So we started looking at the relationship with food and we started to look at how her relationship with food was shaped from a young age. And we started to pinpoint things of like, yeah, this is what my mom did. This is what my parents did. And not to knock her parents, they were doing the best they could. However, they didn't know. They didn't know any better. But her relationship with food was being developed in an unhealthy way, which was taking her as an adult to repeat destructive patterns that even were being repeated with her own family. specifically with sugar. And this was also putting her in a dangerous state that in the future, if she did not change that relationship with food, she would potentially, she could end up like her father, who sadly passed away because of diabetes and kidney issues. And now that she's learned this insight, what is she doing? She's now able to hand it down to her kids. She's educating her kids. She's teaching them how to have a healthier and better relationship with food. And that is amazing, because that's exactly the power that this information starts to bring to our life. Number 4, then comes habitual learning, right? And that's where I talked about at the beginning that if we repeat this pattern over and over, we then it starts to become part of us, right? And it starts to really groom us and shape us. And it starts to then, because of neuroplasticity, start to change neural pathways in our brain that now start to become harder to change those patterns. Going back to the example of the cookie. If that pattern is repeated, I'm given a treat every time I feel bad, I'm now going to start to go to that often. And now it's going to start to be a repeated pattern of mine because of neuroplasticity. Now I start to go to that. My brain starts to change and believe that every time I'm sad, every time I'm angry, I need a treat to feel better. And this is how then habitual learning starts to happen. It starts to become a habit. And now it automatically happens and we end up losing control of it. We don't even think about it. It just becomes second nature. Like your habit today might be the first thing you do when you wake up is go to the restroom, brush your teeth. And then from there, maybe you go to the coffee pot, right? And you look at what other habits do you have and you do it the same way. So habitual learning is by learning repeatedly. And so the more we start to do these types of patterns with our food growing up is how today we have the same thing. I'm sure you eat the same foods for Thanksgiving. Why? You've done them the same way every year. Habitual learning. That's your relationship with food for Thanksgiving. That's what you've adopted. And that goes for any other occasion. And that could just be a standard dinner that you make. You probably make the same one. And it probably goes back to foods that your parents made for you or your grandparents made for you growing up. So habitual learning is another way that we start to learn from a young age how to develop this relationship with food. And then the last one is insight learning. Learning through past experiences. And with food, it is no different. Our relationship with food is developed through past experiences. If growing up, we are given certain things, we then start to associate even feelings with these foods. We start to associate special events with these types of foods. We start to experience scents, smells, different things within our family that we start to associate with these foods, with past experiences that we've had related to these foods. That's why maybe today there's foods that you absolutely don't like because you remember the time that you ate them, it tasted terrible. And today, even if you try to like them because of your past experience that you learned you didn't like it, today, you're probably not going to like it. Even though they say our taste buds change every 7 years or so. Don't quote me on that, but it's something along that. We can develop new taste buds and start to explore maybe foods that we didn't like when we were younger that maybe today we can start liking. Like for me, one of the things that I will never like probably is raw onions. I remember the day I tried them when I was young. They tasted disgusting. That past experience has carried with me all along. And still to this day, I cannot eat raw onions. Anybody that knows a little bit about me knows onions, you better not give them to me raw. So through past experiences is how we learn. And that is how even our relationship with food is developed. I remember the first time dad made liver and onions. It'll be the last time I will ever try them. But the smell, just by saying that, I can remember that moment. I smelled it at the house and it smelled like iron and it tasted disgusting and it smelled disgusting. And still today, just by thinking about that past experience, I get nauseated. I get chills. And so that is how past experiences or insight learning starts to even shape our relationship with food from a young age. So why am I sharing all this information with you? Look, I want us to be able to start developing a better relationship with food. And in order to do that, we need insight. The more awareness we have about our life, about ourselves, about our past, about what shaped us, about what things have inspired us to become us, to give us the habits that we have today. Because everything that we adopt today has come through a behavior that we've learned, through learning it. And our relationship with food is no different. It literally impacts us more than anything, almost most than anything else out there, because it literally starts to shape who we are. It's what we utilize to make us survive, to live, to thrive, to excel, to exist, to perform. The relationship with food an athlete has versus somebody that is living a normal lifestyle or blue collar life, or anybody that is not an athlete, is going to be totally different. And what is the difference? Based on the type of life that they desire to have. And so today, if we're reflecting and looking at your life and you realize, well, it's not the life I desire, or it's not the life that I would really like to have, well, then let's look at what is our relationship with food like? And being able to reflect what your childhood life relationship with food was, we can start to associate and look at, that is why today I struggle with this. That is why today I'm so attracted to this type of food. That is why today I might have an unhealthy relationship with food. That is why today I might be so attracted to sugar, which is causing me to have an unhealthy relationship with sugar, which is impacting my body, which is impacting my health, which is causing me to live a less than desired life. It's all connected. And I bring this insight to you to bring awareness that can help us better associate, to slowly start making changes so that we can start changing our relationship with food to a better relationship, not a perfect relationship, a better relationship and a more healthy relationship that will ultimately help us live the life that we desire to live. That is my hope for you. That is the purpose of this insight. That is the purpose of this information, because I care about you. I want you to live your best life. I want you to live the life that you truly desire. And I want you to thrive, to live a healthy, engaging lifestyle with no complications and not having to resort to diets, meal plans, restrictive meal plans, or emotionally eat. I lost my childhood best friend at the age of 21 to obesity. And I made a commitment at that point that I would never, if I knew somebody, or as long as I can impact somebody, I would do everything that I could to never let somebody that I know or love go through what my best friend went through. And that is why we're here today. So I hope this information was insightful. I hope it was beneficial. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to drop them in the comments or simply shoot me an email. listennotdefeated@gmail.com. listennotdefeated@gmail.com. Or look, let's connect. I'd like to know you. I'd like to connect with you. Let's have a deeper conversation about this. Go to my website, www.davidhernandez.co, davidhernandez.co. Shoot me a message there. You can reach out to me there, or you can follow me and reach me at all the social media platforms at Dave K. Hernandez. That is my handle on all social media. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn at Dave K. Hernandez. Connect with me. follow me, insight. Let's get insight together. Let's share this platform together and share this with somebody that you know can benefit from it. Look, my goal is to impact. I'm on a mission to impact people, end emotional eating, and live a healthy and thriving lifestyle. If you know of anyone, share this episode with them, share this channel with them, share this information so that all can be blessed. If you haven't yet subscribed, click the subscribe button right now. Follow me for more information. And remember, every week on Thursdays, I am coming with a new episode to impact your life and to help you live a not defeated life. Remember, you are incredible. This is Listen, You're Not Defeated. And I'm your host, David Hernandez, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Once again, remember, you are not defeated. Click the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a blessed day.